video clips of some of the key moments. It turns out to be very interesting. It's kind of an experiment. We're not covering every session, and because of our limited time, we didn't have time to wrestle with the technological details it would take for us to do sessions that have simultaneous interpretation. So everybody you see is speaking English. So the African session is not here. So it's a partial report. Maybe we'll do part 2 when we have more time and more people and et cetera, et cetera. But this is a kind of an interesting way to get started. So we're going to start with session 1, which I was one of the coordinators for, and I'm going to share the screen, and we'll see how this goes. All right. Session 1 dealt with enlisting global cooperation on the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And what we had were people who are affiliated with the International Summit Council for Peace, people who are heads of state or who operate and function at that level. So I will present a few highlights from Session 1 organized by UPF's International Summit Council for Peace. This session was produced by Dr. Franco Famolaro, president of UPF Canada, who's over in Korea right now. And we were fortunate to have Ambassador Christopher Hill as the moderator. He's a true gentleman and a diplomat who was enormously popular in Korea, even though he only was U.S. ambassador for about 7 months when he served there, but he's still a rock star when he goes back home. Ambassador Christopher Hill.
So there is much to be concerned about in terms of peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, but since just worrying about a problem is not a solution, I think what we have today is a very distinguished panel of international experts.
The Honorable Stephen Harper, the Right Honorable Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister of Canada, was one of our panelists. He has a great deal of international political experience in both the Middle East and Northeast Asia. And he points out that in Northeast Asia, it's really a tough neighborhood for sure. And he stressed the importance of the Korean Peninsula because of its unique set of circumstances, including its geography as a linchpiece for peace or conflict in that region.
Korea's immediate neighborhood are, of course, 2 of Asia's greatest powers, China and Japan. And 2 other major global powers are just as close, Russia, which sits on the border to the north, and America, whose forces
Everybody please mute yourself.
So as long as Korean division and hostility endure, the wider peace of the world will also be in question.
Prime Minister, sorry, I skipped ahead. I accidentally hit the play bar.
The international community does not want to admit.
Okay, this is a very interesting quote. I'm going to make sure I get the whole thing. Prime Minister Harper is a political realist and has never shied away from harsh truths, difficult realities. One of the blessings that comes with no longer being in public office is that as a private citizen, as opposed to a public official, you're more free to speak aloud what everyone is actually thinking.
Which sits on the border to the north, and America, whose forces remain present in the south.
This is part of what he just
So as long as Korean division and hostility endure, the wider peace of the world will also be in question.
Here's that second
All Koreans know in their hearts something that much of the international community does not want to admit. That true peace on the Korean Peninsula will mean the end of the North Korean state. Why? Because Korea is one nation, and if given the choice, Koreans will choose a society like the South, because the Republic of Korea is the society that free Koreans have already chosen.
His Excellency Zelmana Bonnevik was Prime Minister of Norway as the leader of the Christian Democratic Party. He had 2 successful terms in the early 2000s and is currently president of the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights.
The people of the Korean Peninsula has during history suffered under occupation and wars. and they really deserve peace and independence. I saw with my own eyes these facts, the great differences between North and South, when I visited both countries in the middle of the 1990s as a member of a parliamentarian delegation from Norway. And the gap between North and South has only increased in the years after. But still, a reunification should be the ultimate goal. It seemed also to be impossible to unite East and West Germany, but they succeeded.
We also had on our panel His Excellency President Anthony Carmona of the Caribbean island state of Trinidad and Tobago. He laments Korea's arms buildup, but has also experienced some diplomatic successes in his own pursuit of keeping the Caribbean free of nuclear weapons.
In January 2022, North Korea has engaged in the launching of several missiles, including a nuclear-capable hypersonic glide missile. In the light of this, the Treaty of Tlatelolco offers a solution. It founded the Organization for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean, OPANAL, establishing Latin America and the Caribbean as a nuclear weapons-free zone. The Caribbean, as a zone of peace, can facilitate future peaceful negotiations of the Korean Peninsula.
And we also had on our panel Mr. Doug Bondo of the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. And while there is always hope in the seemingly impossible case of unifying the peninsula, Mr. Bondo reiterates the caution that as long as the governing value systems of North and South Korea remain at polar opposites to one another, then all the best laid hopes and strategies for reunification encounter major difficulties.
It's hard to think of a more difficult process than to bring together a capitalist and democratic South and a very different system in the North. Hard to imagine, together in one fell swoop, as Stephen Harper mentioned, the idea that North Korea, the presumption is, would disappear. On my first visit 30 years ago, which is hard to believe, I had North Koreans worried about being swallowed.
Dr. Nicholas Swanstrom, also on the panel, is director of the Institute for Security and Development Policy in Stockholm, Sweden, and one of its co-founders. He's a fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute of the Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins. He thinks the peace process might benefit from working off-site in a multidisciplinary fashion.
We need to look at a version of the Helsinki process, where we have different baskets coming in, and we can work with different issues. A process which I actually have sort of dubbed Arirang process to give it a bit of Korean touch, where we can work on confidence building, we can work on economy, we can work on aid, denuclearization, etc. And when we can't move forward on one issue, we can try to move into the next issue.
Okay. And that's the report from Session 1 of the International Summit Council for World Peace. I take you now to Mr. David Casbo, who is Executive Director of Universal Peace Federation in Michigan and was instrumental in organizing the session for IAPD, which was the second session in the conference. David, welcome. You want to share your screen and unmute and share your screen.
And unmute, and we'll get ourselves set up here. Okay, the topic for our Interfaith Association for Peace and Development session was spiritual leadership and people-to-people peace building. The session was moderated by Archbishop George Stallings, the director of IAPD. We had 4 presenters and 3 panelists. Each of the 3 clips I've chosen from the session present a unique and important aspect of peacemaking with reference to Korea. Our first clip will be from Bishop Don Mears. He's a senior pastor of Evangel Cathedral in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. His remarks center on our foundational biblical verse for the session, Jesus' words in Matthew 5:9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called sons of God." And the key point for his remarks here is that peacemaking must be in action.
The word make in the term peacemakers comes from the Greek verb that means to do or to make. It is a word that's bursting with energy. It mandates action. It requires initiative. Someone has to drag the combatants to the table and give them a reason to put down their arms. Notice, if you would, that Jesus did not say, "Blessed are the peace wishers," or the peace hopers, or the peace dreamers, or the peace lovers, or even the peace talkers. Peace must be made. I want to say that again. To be a peacemaker, you must grasp that peace must be made. Peace never happens by chance. A peacemaker is not one who is passive. They always take the initiative. They are up and doing. They are not hearers, but they're doers. So when these two words are taken together, peace and maker, it describes one who actively pursues peace. The peacemaker pursues more than the absence of conflict. They do not avoid strife. In fact, sometimes peacemakers will create strife. They aren't merely seeking to appease the warring parties. They aren't trying to accommodate everyone. Instead, they're pursuing all the beauty and blessedness of God upon each other. Peacemaking is indeed a very divine work.
Well, thank you, Bishop Mears. Our next clip will be from the presentation of Haj Roshan Khan. He is a Muslim cleric who is a leader of a multitude of community-centered organizations in Guyana, South America, including the Guyana Islamic Forum for Education, Peace, and Development, and the co-founder of the RK Human Development Foundation. He's also the national chairman of UPF in Georgetown, Guyana. Key remarks that he made centered upon the important outcomes of peace in Korea for peace in the world.
My comments quickly. The debacle of splitting the Korean Peninsula was truly an act of evil against the peoples of the Korean Peninsula and against God Almighty. This is a thing that has truly stirred the heart and has caused great founder, our holy founder, Sun Myung Moon. That unholy decision brought pains to the holy land of the peoples of Korea. And it affected, to this day, their psyches, their physics, their bodies, their mentalities. The world needs Korean Peninsula to foster and encourage world peace, inspire humanity, so that we can help the entire world cause in conflicts to find peace. The Korean Peninsula and the unification of it, I believe, is the nexus that can create true harmony in the minds of humanity, leaders, and countries around the world.
Thank you, Haj. Our next clip will be from the presentation of Bishop Joseph Atterley. He's the pastor of Christian Union Church of the Caribbean in Barbados. In his presentation, he stressed that peacemakers are beyond ideology. They do not get tied to the ideology of one side or the other of the people in conflict. Key point here is he is referencing an important peacemaking principle Father and Mother Moon teach, called head-wing thought. That is, if there's to be peace, both sides must be embraced.
Peacemaking is not an option for the church. It is an imperative. And if the process that you employ is that of reconciliation towards establishing justice and righteousness, those are the elements of peace. That is what he said. And I concur with that wholeheartedly. But then if that is true, my strong view is that the church in the message, that voice of faith cannot be one that simply echoes an ideological position. The church is universal. The church is global. The church should never find itself so influenced by an ideological position that is borrowed from the political systems of this world, that its message cannot be sold anywhere and cannot be marketable anywhere. So the first thing I'm saying is that the message, that voice of faith, that message of the church, if its aim is justice and righteousness as the elements of peace, and if it sees that as an imperative role, according to Apostle Beers, then it cannot allow itself to be influenced by an ideological platform which is borrowed from any particular geographical or geopolitical area.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your time. We'll look forward to some discussion on all these matters.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, David. That was very interesting. It's interesting, you know, you have a whole session and a lot of things get said, but you pick out, it's like a snapshot. A whole bunch of things are going on, but you take 1,000th of 1 second in a photograph. And that's kind of what this is. We have Mr. Alan Jessen, who is a coordinator of the International Association of Economic Development for the country. They put on, in North America, he puts on a lot of seminars that have to do with Korea and other things dealing with business orientation and solutions to problems. Alan, welcome. You want to unmute? Are you muted? You're muted. There we go.
Okay, here we go. So we'll share the screen and thank you all. Optimize. Very good. So pleased to be here with you all. And this is the session is sponsored by the International Association for Peace and Economic Development. And here is our topic today. Just a couple of comments listening to the previous sessions. You know, the religious folks come with real passion and I hope and idealism, and of course the political leaders come with a little more caution. But I think our session really had a lot of hope to it. People believing that we can do something, and in fact, so we're bringing proposals to the table. This session was a combination of our European team and also Africa. So kudos to them for bringing up our first speaker, which is Dr. Raghavan Sitaraman, and he is the group CEO of the Doha Bank, set up in 1978 in Qatar. He was named CEO in September 2007, and since then he has overseen the bank's expansion from its base in Qatar to the United Arab Emirates, India, Singapore, and China. And you'll notice that he speaks passionately about the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex. You'll hear that a few times in his remarks.
Economic precedes politics. Gross welfare to the mass is the drive we need to bring in. We have to open the international economy to North Korea. The Kaesong Industrial Complex, which was commenced, was the right concept on a demilitarized zone. Kaesong Industrial Complex is a key mission. And again, countries which have got specialization, if it is uranium, if it is copper, the rich minerals which is available in North Korea, you can put together, if you understand, India or China can come in. Exports, again, Hong Kong, China, US can step in. There are every area we have scope for opportunities. Gulf itself can contribute in terms of investment. So all these are possibilities than problems. So world at large should rethink wherever there are problems, integration is a solution. One world, one peace, one health, one family.
Our next speaker is Ms. Audra Hodge. She is the CEO of Ascension Exchange. She was a panelist, so she was commenting on the remarks of Dr. Sitaraman. But she's been the driving force in launching and reconstructing over 3,500 businesses since 2006. Her group builds better businesses for investors to invest in by utilizing systems, automation, and proven methodologies to launch, build, and scale companies. She's a sought-after speaker leading economic change through systemization, technology for implementation, and accountability. And her remarks here speak to a very important part of this equation.
I think a lot of times as we are economists and we are looking sometimes at numbers, we forget that there is a different kind of capital, and that's human capital. I believe that part of what we need to be focusing on is the roadmap to integrate them in and bring them to something that they've never seen before.
That was short, but thank you, Ms. Hodge, for that. And this commentator is from Spain. He's Mr. Jose Ramon Riera. He's an economist and businessman with degrees from the University of Complutense in Madrid, and he's currently the founder and CEO of two information technology companies, What's Media Inc. and What's Cine SL. He has extensive sales, management, executive experience working with technology companies in both the United States and Spain. And I heard that he received in 2017 the keys to the city of Miami. So he's a welcome speaker. He has just a short exhortation for us all here.
And this opportunity is we have to create something special to open the economy in North Korea.
Something special. And he liked what he was hearing from Dr. Sitaraman. This is Mr. Bill Brown. He is our other key presenter. He's a board member of the Korean Economic Institute of America, and he's chair of George Washington University's North Korea Economic Forum in the Institute of Korean Studies. He writes and is interviewed as a North Korea expert for Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, the Wall Street Journal, and the Korea Times, Seoul's leading daily newspaper. His career as an economist and East Asia specialist has included extensive work in the CIA, Commerce Department, and the National Intelligence Council. He was raised in Gwangju, Korea, and raised by Presbyterian missionary parents who themselves were born and raised in China and Korea, respectively. He speaks a little Korean. He's been on our programs before, and he has a very deep knowledge of this subject. He is going to offer, he offered several reforms that he believes will help Korea to prepare itself for integration in the world economy. And you'll notice that he says reform first, then open. So his reforms, number one, is in the banking system, which is important to stabilize the currency. Currently, Korea has three currencies circulating: the US dollar, Chinese yuan, and the North Korean won, and there's a lot of instability. He uses the example of South Korea reforms that were done in the 1960s as an example. His second major reform that he proposed was agricultural reform, decollectivization, which was used the example of China in the 1980s. So let's listen to Mr. Brown.
North Korea should reform, then open. So why is it weak productivity? Why is it? It's because of this dual command market system that they've got. The command economy, the planned economy, broke down in their big famine, but it's never been quite replaced by a market system, half and half. So they're kind of caught in this trap between the two. Those two sets of reforms, I'm convinced, would push North Korea. They could do that internally. They don't need a relief from the sanctions to do either of them. They don't really need foreign investment for either of them. 1962, South Korea was the worst saving country in the whole world. Can you imagine that? OECD data. By 1980, like a generation later, they're the best saving country in the world. Well, North Korea could do the same thing with the same kind of policies, create a new money and banking system. They're very hardworking and they're very disciplined. The problem, though, is their system doesn't reward, it doesn't induce them to make the right kind of decisions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Our final panelist here is Mr. Joseph Busha, and he is a Zimbabwean businessman philanthropist. He holds 4 degrees and 7 professional certificates in mathematical finance. After working in corporate finance, he founded in 2000 J.M. Busha Investment Group, a social enterprise focusing on solution-driven investment management, long-term insurance, and general financial advisory services. He's also the founder of the NGO J.M. Busha 54 Races for Peace and Unity in Africa, focusing on programs in Africa that support music, sports, education, and arts in order to bring peace. Mr. Bush is also president of FreeZim Congress, a Zimbabwean political party, and he was a presidential candidate. We had a little trouble with his audio, but we're pleased to briefly share his comments. One of Mr. Bush's comments recommended joining the WTO, and that is the World Trade Organization. Later, Mr. Brown echoes that support, also recommending they join the ILO, which is the International Labor Organization. So at the conclusion of these brief remarks, we will again hear from Dr. Sitharama and all of the speakers addressing a question that was posed by the audience of what can the rest of the world do to help North Korea. So hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.
The talk here is about its relationship with South Korea and the unification with South Korea, because that's where it has to begin.
Use the demilitarized zone as an opportunity for common grounds. Bring in North Koreans and South Koreans. Bring in the global community, whether it is trade or investments or sports or culture or even minerals or mining, whatever be the industry specific. Use a common platform to bring in, one, between North Korea and South Korea, two, bring in global convergence into the demilitarized zones and ensure you bring in values to North Koreans in addition to South Koreans. Once the economic prosperity is visible, I think every ruler will come to terms.
Everybody should be pushing for North Korea to join the ILO and abide by that rule. That would help a lot. The other part is similar, is the WTO.
For me, I believe the answer would be that we could bring someone from collectively around the world to integrate in, teach them to be the teachers of their own people.
If we want to save North Korea and integrate with South Korea, we need to convince the president that to do something immediately. And I think these type of proposals are here over the table to show him, to send him perhaps a letter well redacted and well prepared in order that he understands that he needs to move forward.
To allow North Korea to join the World Trade Organization. That will allow the world to enforce ILO rules adhere to laws, but also I think to be able to subscribe to the United Nations principles of responsible investments. That's the only time we'll be able to ensure that the citizens of North Korea work under the same conditions as many other people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. And Roger Weatherall, who serves as partner and co-coordinator of this this session with Alan Jessen, served as moderator of that session, did an excellent job. The next session was sponsored by the International Association of Academicians for Peace. Bob Duffy in Canada, who's president of UPF Canada, is the coordinator of that for North America. And he is engaged in some academic activities right now and can't do it, so I agreed to give his report, and I will do that right now. Bob Duffy, as I mentioned, is chair of this of IAP, and this session they explored the tendency of the media and elsewhere to demonize North Korea. Not that there isn't a lot to demonize there, but it's also very counterproductive if you really want to get stuff done. When people are misbehaving badly, you can constantly point that out, or you can work on the issues. Anyway, this session was unusual in that way. It examined the effect of this demonization on our own ability to engage and make progress with that country. One of the speakers in this panel was Russian, but as I said, we don't have the ability to do simultaneous interpretation on that today. So Dr. Manzaroff, who's well known to you from Georgetown University, was one of the keynote speakers. I liked his advice to academicians to check our cognitive bias, which diminishes our understanding and access to the real DPRK and the reality of its people. So here's a short clip of Alexander Manzaroff's remarks.
Now, as academicians, what can we do to overcome this demonization? As I said, again, as long as the psychological warfare continues, there's very little academicians can do, as long as the governments maintain the current policies. But nevertheless, beyond psychological warfare, as academicians, we can and we must recognize that this demonization is nothing but, other than part of psychological warfare, a cognitive bias, if you wish. It's a particular mental model that skews our perceptions of reality. Again, I visited North Korea many times. I lived there for a number of years. I graduated from Kim Il-sung University. I mean, you don't need to tell me anything about North Korea, but whatever I know does not amount to any characterizations of evil, which I learned in school and church through reading holy books, if you wish.
Thank you. Anthropologist Dr. Ok-Young Park is a Korean Canadian who did her fieldwork, her anthropology fieldwork in West Sumatra, Indonesia, and also on Jeju Island in Korea. I like her approach to looking at North Korean society as an anthropologist would. You may recall Margaret Mead's studies on Samoa and things like that. And that is to look at it from within rather than from the outside, to immerse yourself and study it from within rather than just parachuting in as so many experts do.
In anthropology, there is an interesting concept called ethic and emic view, which might contribute to this discussion on peace in Korean Peninsula. In a nutshell, emic view refers to insider's view of a society. So when we study, as an anthropologist, when I study a given society, whether you apply emic view, insider's view, is different from ethic view, which is the outsider's view. So when you use ethic view, it's essentially you are imposing outsider's view on interpreting this given society. To explain this a bit in a plain language, I would like to talk about briefly my first contact with North Korea. This was many years ago when I was a child in Korea. We were always presented with the image of demons, as Dr. Manzaroff mentioned, even inside the Korea at that time. This was right after the Korean War. And the North Koreans had demons with red face and horns. And this presentation is deeply seated in Korean psyche. And from this comes the naming of the red, referring to North Koreans. And I discovered this is even true now, and I discovered in Canada and Europe, many people hold this image of North Korea. As Dr. Manzaroff mentioned, And then I left Korea for America soon after, and I studied anthropology. In my introduction, I studied many different societies. And 6 years later, I became interested in North Korea and even visited North Korea a few years ago. And I discovered that they are not red-faced demons, as I was told. They looked exactly like me, and they had same norms and etiquettes that I was raised with in South Korea. So now I'm discovering how I have been ignorant about North Korea and educating myself. Dr. Felix Kim, it's first time I hear about the meeting, anecdotes of a meeting between President Kim Il-sung and Revenue Moon. I knew a little bit about their meetings and this foundation created by Revenue Moon, but and I knew that he was a very fervent anti-communist at certain period. But you mentioned that President Kim Il-sung said, "Why should I persecute this person who prays for the salvation of Korea?" And they became both patriots and like brothers. I never heard of this before, so I'm glad to know of this fact.
Dr. Joseph Twilliger is a tenured professor of neurobiology at Columbia University. He's also an insider in Korea and speaks fluent Korean, Mandarin, and Japanese, and about at least half a dozen other languages. He was deeply troubled by the degree of politicization and disinformation evident in everyday U.S. life. Sports events and the media are two good examples. He suggested that academicians should take the lead and get our own house in order, be the example, and fix our own house rather than telling North Koreans to change and to be like us.
I never would have believed that it would be impossible in America to watch a football game without seeing political slogans everywhere on the field and on people's helmets. Our media is now largely voice of a party, right? It's Rodong Shimun. It's like each media outlet represents their team, and they want people to all think the same things and not actually engage in critical thinking. The demonization that Alexander talked about is not just us demonizing North Korea, it's Democrats and Republicans demonizing each other when the real argument is over which 10% of the population gets a little tax cut. So I think as academics, we first need to fix our own house, stop the demonization here, and be the example we used to be to other countries, where other people used to come here and say, wow, this is great. People are free. They can say whatever they want, and they don't hate each other, and there's no fighting. And today, it's not really like that. So it worries me. And I think that as a first step to trying to think about building a good relationship with places like North Korea, you know, when I go there, I try to be an ambassador for America and try to represent us well and change how they think about us. But today, you know, when you talk to them, they'll ask questions like, well, what about this? What about that? How come you have political slogans in your stadiums? Or why are you guys demonizing each other? And why are you banning our media? And it makes it very hard to take the high road. So I think this is something that as an academic community, we actually are in the position to control. Even though we can't go there now, we can at least try to change our own selves and re-emphasize critical thinking like Alexander said. And I mean, Alexander grew up where, you know, it was kind of similar. We're becoming more similar to the country that you grew up in. And I'd like to hear your comment on that as well, just how America has been changing when we all keep talking about how to get them to change.
Thank you. That was very interesting, kind of humbling, opening a window to self-reflection. Is that are you all able to hear this? You're able to hear it?
Yeah.
I wonder what that is. Oh, I forgot to shut off the Let
We
me
must find a way to use the
let me
gifts that we have been blessed with to
find it. I have to. I think I have to formally end it.
Yes, when
Okay. I stepped on Cindy's thing a bit. Okay, it ended it. I'm new to technology. Sorry. 21st century. Our next presenter is Cindy Pfeiffer, who worked with a team of very capable women to put together such an interesting session. This is sponsored by the International Association of First Ladies for Peace and also Women in Leadership, the organization affiliated with the Washington Times Foundation. And Cindy has put together some highlights from that session. Welcome, Cindy. Unmute, as we always say, and there we go. Unmute, Cindy.
And
There.
I will share my screen as the others have.
As the others have, and be sure to click that optimize and the sound buttons,
Yeah.
otherwise.
All right. So can you see it okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone. It's so informative to hear what came before us. We were session 7, and part of what we try to achieve is each person has an attribute of what they'd like to give. And with the Women's Federation for World Peace, who helped us, and then the International Association of First Ladies for Peace, it's our desire to bring together the current and former First Ladies worldwide, drawing upon their experience and wisdom and the real contributions to peaceful endeavors. And it often entails highlighting what you do best and thinking of how you can use the best that you have to offer to help the world. This is what I liked about First Lady Yumi Hogan, our first presenter. We have a little clip of hers where she talks about using individual talents in service. So I'll start with her.
I am pleased to join you virtually for this Think Tank 2022 Global Forum. I believe very strongly that all of us here today must lead by example. Lasting change starts at home. We must find a way to use the gifts that we have been blessed with to give back to our communities.
So our next presenter is Dr. Rima Sala, who worked under Ban Ki-moon at the United Nations. She was with UNICEF, is the chair of the Early Childhood Peace Consortium, and works with the Child Study Center at Yale School of Medicine. She has had firsthand experience with presidents, first ladies, and she could provide direct intervention in war-torn areas. She's a person of many sites. So throughout these presentations, we will have clips of the same people. And
yes, when first ladies organize themselves, yes, you see their power. Women in the Republic of Korea and in Korea in general have to raise their voices and claim their important role in building peace. They have to sit at the table. They had to be part of the discussion. I would like also at the end to pay tribute to Madame Jihan Moon for her vision and for her devotion to the cause of peace in the peninsula and in the world.
Nothing is in. So this is the beginning of Jean Becker. She was the chief of staff to President George H.W. Bush from 1994 to 2018. Plus she was deputy press secretary to First Lady Barbara Bush from 1989 to 1992. The beginning of her clip, she talks about when President Bush first went into office in 1989 and goes to Japan. So we'll start from here.
Possible. Something that he did right after becoming president in 1989, about a month into his presidency, he went to Japan to attend the funeral of Emperor Hirohito. And many of his World War II veteran peers were shocked that he would go to the funeral of Emperor Hirohito. I will remind everybody that President Bush was shot down on September 2nd, 1944, over the island of Chichijima by, the Japanese. And so he came from such a strong, he had so much credibility on this issue because he knew he was at war with Japan. And what he said to all of his critics is, we're now friends. Japan is now one of our greatest allies. And we moved on. We resolved our issues and our anger and our grief from World War II. I just wanted to bring up those two examples of how President Bush truly felt nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
If you just keep trying, if you just have an open mind. Barbara Bush was a force of nature all on her own. And I would like to end my few minutes here using her words, because she was the first lady. I was not. I just want to read to you a very brief reading from the book, Prose of Wisdom, which is full of all of her words of advice. This is from a commencement speech she gave here in the United States in 1991. She was very concerned about intolerance, about bullying. Her words were really meant for the young people of the United States, but I think they're important to the entire world. And I think they're important for the people who are trying to tackle some of our biggest international issues right now. So she's talking about intolerance. As most of you know, one of the great strengths of the United States is we're a country of immigrants, but sometimes our great diversity can lead us down the wrong path. And that is what she was trying to address. Again, this is 1991. I would like for you to think about your relationships in a broader sense, the way you feel about and interact with people beyond your loved ones. I'm talking about the great need for better tolerance in our society. Tolerance is much more than just respecting people of a different race. It is a constant stream of little acts in our daily lives, big and small, choices we face every day in the way we think about, the way we talk about, and the way we deal with other human beings. It's about respecting people who have a physical or mental handicap, people who grew up different from the way you did, people who speak a different language or practice a different religion, people who are fatter or thinner or older or younger. Political extremists roam the land, setting citizens against one another based on their class or their religion. Such bullying is outrageous and not worthy of a nation grounded in the values of tolerance and respect. Let us fight back against the boring politics of division and derision. We must conquer the temptation to assigning bad motives to people who disagree with us. We must build a society in which people can join in common causes without having to surrender their identities. She was talking to the students, but I think she would say this to all the great women on this call. You can lead the way. Share your thoughts and experiences and your hopes and frustrations. Defend other people's right to speak. If harmony is our goal, let's pursue harmony.
The group we have, although we represent women, we are so happy to work equally with men and women on the same banner. So that reminds us of how tolerance goes beyond gender and everything. Our next presenter on the panel is Mrs. Angelica Sally from the Women's Federation for World Peace, USA. So she will share and the others will share to the end of the clip.
Fear and mistrust are strong emotions, and they surely taint all kinds of deliberations and decisions on both sides. They are invisible obstacles to peace, and they must be addressed for any peace to be authentic.
We sometimes think that what goes on in the rest of the world, why should we be worried about that? I'm sure every country has that issue a little bit, but we think, you know, put America first. Why should we be worried what's happening anywhere else? I definitely disagree with that, but I would love these very smart, articulate women to explain why is it important to the whole world what happens on the Korean Peninsula?
What happens in a country affects the peace and security of the whole of globally. And that is why we have to know about the situation in every country, and particularly women. Maybe it is the time for women to try to understand the problems in other countries. And for example, coming from the UN, maybe they should be aware also for the tools that we have in our hand.
I think one of the great strengths of women is that we lead by example.
This webinar of all women is really amazing and really reinforces the strength of every woman. And when I talk about women, I don't only talk about women leaders and first ladies, but every woman in every village, in every refugee camp, in every displacement camp. Those are the women that we should bring their voices. We bring their voices to the United Nations, and we should bring their voices in every meeting that we are. Because they will help us, as they told me in many, many occasions when I was in Africa, and also during our tour for the high-level panel on peace operations that former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for. We were 16 people on this panel, and we were, I think, 4 women on this. And we went to all the continents of the world, and we met with women. Some women told us, "What are you doing, the United Nations? We don't feel that we are part of this. We see your big cars, your white cars, but what are you doing to every woman in this village?" And this is what is very important. How do we bring this voice? And this reinforced my, passion to build peace, but start also in the communities, to start building peace in the communities. First ladies are at the forefront. Yes. They are listened to. People listen to them. As many first ladies in West and Central Africa told me, use us. Our husbands listen to us, and also members of the country listen to us. We are in the forefront. So my appeal to first ladies is to listen to every woman in their country.
Peace has to do with action and doing and leading by example. And also the collaboration, I believe the first ladies and the civil society together is the real power, right? Together, because the grassroots is dealing with realities, and the leadership sees the bigger picture and can make changes and makes legislation and so forth. And so I have to mention Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, because she is the woman who is leading by example, right? And that's why there is hope. The Valleys of Hope are because she is actually showing her own investment, right? And she's bringing us all together in the think tank, right? It's tremendous to see how men and women start thinking about the Korean Peninsula because of her initiative. I would like to give her a round of applause if we could, because of her, we are here, and there is, men and women together, working like 2 wheels of an engine to bring forth solutions.
Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to do the dishes. And what Mrs. Bush loved about that quote is, for the first ladies and the women who have such a strong bully pulpit, we're counting on you to change the world. But talking about the grassroots is so important, because just because you're not a first lady doesn't mean you don't have a job here. Everybody has something that you can do. In fact, it's typically the people who do the dishes who end up contributing most to change. So everybody can do, sometimes it's just the tiniest little step that can make a difference.
This next session shows Mrs. Franco from Paraguay. And we couldn't get a translation, but I just wanted you to see her there. She's a wonderful former First Lady. When I'm thinking of Madame Franco, she mentioned God, and usually behind every inspiration is when I pray and really contemplate it, God is always there with giving us an answer. So we can never leave out that power that is within us too, through prayer. Thank you so much for listening to our sessions.
So there's much to be concerned about in terms of peace and stability on
Stop your sharing. There we go.
Oh dear.
Okay, and
let me
looking around for our 4 presenters. We're pretty much out of time. I just wanted to say thank you all for you had no idea you were going to be asked to do this until yesterday, and then you had to spend a lot of time going through clippings and things and picking out the best, and I kept calling you, and you guys held up very well and showed incredible patience. So I'm grateful to you guys. Thank you so much for taking time to put that together and for picking up when I called. I know after a while it didn't get easy, but you did. Thank you so much.
Larry, what an idea, to go back, not just for this session, but for that last year or 2 years, all these, you got such a wealth of comments and commentary.
I was thinking about that. This could be if we had more time, we would pick more interesting quotes, more dynamic quotes. We would do them in foreign languages because we'd have interpretation available, and you could pick from a whole year of interesting and salacious stuff.
And
So
good
that would be
input for people
very
to
interesting
think about.
By the way, I like doing the dishes. I'd rather do that than change the world, because the world never changes, and doing the dishes has a beginning, middle, and an end.
That's right.
And even more than that, I like mowing the lawn, because that really has a beginning. You see the progress. The grass
Yeah.
go through the flower bed and they all disappear. But
I like the fact that one of the speakers said that our husbands listen to us.
Yes.
So you should listen to us.
Don't mess with me. My
They have
husband
power.
runs a country and has
Right.
no.
Yes.
I think Dr. Rimasala was saying that in Africa, the presidents would consult with their wives, and so they listened and had communication. And with first ladies, you never know what they've heard and where their power may come from.
Yeah. And thank all the rest of you, UPF field people, for. I was going to throw this whole thing open to a big giant discussion, but there's not enough time among everybody in the gallery. But I'd like to do that sometime. But because we're out of time here. But Cindy and Alan and David, I do full face plant in the dirt. Kyung Bae, thank you so much. You guys are really.
Thank you, Larry, for pulling it together.
Yeah. And thanks to Kayleigh for actually coming up with the idea. She's amazing. Okay, there we go.
All right.
I said it and I'm glad. See you guys later.
Yeah,
Take care.
thank you.
God bless you
Thank
all.
one and all. God bless us one
All
and
right.
all.
See you later.
Great program. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.